Good morning and welcome to Supermania. I am your host, Catherine McCord, and I am excited for today's episode because it's something about which I am really not an expert, and that is parenting. So you may not know this about me, but I do not have children. I have 10 godchildren, literally, and I've helped raise my sister, but I do not have children. So this is something that, while I do have some outside knowledge about, I don't have a whole lot of personal experience. So I'm very excited to talk about this. So I would like to go ahead and bring on my guest. We have the wonderful Jessie with us.
Catherine,
Hi.
I love your intro, by the way.
Thank you. I made it, so I'm very proud of it.
You should be. I was like sitting there, like nodding along, smiling. It's great.
It's kind of a personal thing for me. And I just, and I had friends that went, "Oh, you forgot this superpower, you forgot this." And I said, "Okay, I can't list all of them, guys. Like the intro would be like 2 hours long."
That is true. That is true, right? It's so true.
It is. We're a pretty unique group. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what brings you here with us today.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I'm Jessie, and I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation. So I'm the mama of a neurodiverse child. I have 2 young daughters. My oldest is neurodiverse, and we've known that so her diagnosis is both ADHD and SPD, sensory processing disorder. And the ADHD diagnosis came later, but we've known since she was about 2.5 that she had some sort of sensory, and then we got the official diagnosis when she was around 3.5. And I have been on this journey over, the last 30 plus years of my life of really understanding who I am, using them as my mirror. And I think having a daughter who is neurodiverse has really opened my eyes to so many different things, which has made me both a better leader, both in corporate, a leader in life, and a better mother.
I love that. It's true though. When you go through a little bit different experience, it can just give you a whole new set of empathy skills and understanding skills, just a whole different experience. So I want to reference real quick. So in our last show, we talked to Trip O'Dell, who's a dyslexic person, and he is or has dyslexia. However, everybody has different terminology. So let's start off the show with reminding everybody that everyone has different terminology. We accept the different terminologies here. If you have different terminology, please feel free to drop it in the comments, but we'll use whatever is natural for us. So we were talking about his journey there, and he has 2 children who are also neurodiverse. And he's going through a battle right now with their school about the fact that they're just refusing very basic accommodations, and they're trying to stick his kids in classes where their education will be stunted. And we had on Dr. Jerry Johnson before, who's wonderful, and she's talked about how kids are often miscoded and all that kind of thing in the system. I have to ask, kind of first and foremost, as a mama, how frustrating is it when the outside world tries to put things on your child that don't belong there? Try to put labels and negative information into their brains. What does that feel like?
I'm actually going to start crying. It's really hard. I mean, as a mom, I have this innate desire to protect my children, right, from all the things. And I also know that the type of child that I want to raise is one who's going to be independent and strong and have the tools to be able to live their life their way. And so it's often this conflict, right? This internal conflict of like wanting to jump in and like fight their battles for them, but also recognizing that no, like my job is actually to give them the tools, to model the tools for them to, learn how to advocate for themselves. But
I love that. That reminds me of my parents. My parents were very much you're not my appendage, you're your own little your own little human. So we're going to set you up for success, and just give you the tools.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very different from how I grew up in a very large Catholic Italian family. So the way that I'm raising my children is very different than how I was raised. In my extended family, my immediate family, my parents, again, made a very conscious decision to view us each as individuals. And it's hard. It when you were asking that question, I had tears in my eyes because it really is tiring and exhausting and all the feels. And yet it's also so rewarding when you see your child able to model. So my oldest she just turned 6 last week, right? So she's still very young and does not yet know how to advocate for herself to the degree that, she will as an adult, which is to be expected.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but I was just gonna say, like, my heart melts every time I see like small wins of her actually advocating for herself, because it's, we're building that foundation for her. And I think that's so important.
It is. And I'm so glad that you talked about that, because that foundation is huge. And my parents were very conscious with me in general about this. And then as I developed my neurodiversity, as I got, because mine is one that's developed it doesn't manifest until you get older. My father, who had somewhat similar, he has different issues, but he had, or different diagnoses, but he had something with which he could relate, and so he prepared me for that, and it would make him so happy when, okay, she's got this. You can see the oh, all right, she's got it now. She's mastered this. She can do it, and it was really interesting. It was a really beautiful relationship. And my mother, who is not neurodiverse, she had her own way of continuing to teach me, and just general, self-pride and standing up for yourself and confidence. But my dad just had that empathetic, like, I got you. I'm there with you. I understand. We're going to master this. And he has. And I've always looked to him as a role model for that.
I love that. And I think about myself and my husband. And I'll be really candid, the way that I'm raising my children is not how I thought I would be raising my children. And that's okay, right? I think that for me, we're given the kids that we're given for lots of different reasons. And so my husband can relate to my daughter in certain ways. So he has really high anxiety, so does she. So they often talk about how their brains like swirl, and she relates to him on that different level. And so when her and I have conversations, we talk about how everybody's different and how everyone's brains react in different ways. My daughter's really visual, and so am I. So we often, are talking and role modeling. And
I love that.
I think that, for me, at the core, it was having to understand that, like you said earlier, like, she's a little human. She's her own little human. And I have to meet her where she's at. And Pamela, this is going to answer part of your question of how do I foster advocating, is I had to model that for her. And so candidly, that was really hard for me. I grew up in a way where, I was praised for being, like, very good at school and not having to work very hard to do that. And I got the good job and I did all the things, and in all of that, I lost who I was, and I just sort of like pandered to everybody else. And it wasn't until we, decided to have children and went on this whole infertility journey and then had kids and realized one was neurodiverse, right? It was just sort of these mirrors being led to me and realizing, oh no, like, I can't let my perfectionism get in the way of like not speaking up. Oh no, I can't allow those comments to be not addressed anymore. Even though at my core, it makes me so uncomfortable to lean into those uncomfortable conversations. I have recognized time and time again that if I'm not able to do it, she's not going to be able to do it. And so I've really had to lean into that for myself and model for her and have conversations around, hey, did you see how mommy just, asked. So like,
Yes.
right? Like,
Intentional parenting. That's what I tell
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Intentional parenting. My parents did that. And it was very much a focus for them. It was very much lead by example, very much conscious conversation of what did you notice about this? What are your takeaways? What are some things that, mommy and daddy could have done better? What are some things that you could have done better? And very, very conscious conversations of confidence,
yes.
and of understanding. And again, tying back to this is an individual human. They're different than you. They process information differently from you. So you need to make sure of what make sure that they're receiving what you think you're putting out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like so an example of one of the ways that I've modeled for her. So last summer when we were still in Chicago, I had her in a ninja camp, which was really good for her. But
I'm sorry,
what
did you say ninja camp?
ninja camp? Yeah, it's
I'm
like
just picturing,
like
hold on. I'm just picturing
obstacle
a bunch
course.
of little kids with like little outfits and little fake swords, like going around like shaking each other
No,
and
no,
sword fighting.
it was not that. It was
Okay.
like those American Gladiator sort of thing.
Okay. So they weren't like learning to be sneaky and
No,
like
it
sneak.
was
Okay.
like an obstacle course situation. And we called it ninja camp. So it was this big gym. Like she didn't know a ton of people there, but she had like one friend that we had known in Chicago. And so, the first day she was so excited. The second day she was less excited. The third day it was like a battle. Like she did not want to go. And I had this whole,
Oh
I
no.
had to pull her aside and say, Lucy, like, help me understand why you don't want to go, right? Asking lots of questions, being really curious, validating her feelings. And it turns out that in the like back half of the camp, they turn off all the lights in this big gym and there's only one skylight and they watch a movie. Now there's two issues with this for my daughter. One, she does not like dark. And two, she also doesn't like movies. It's like something with like how she processes that. And so I was like, okay, Lucy, if we're able to ask them if, there's things that you can do differently, would you still like to go to camp? And she was like, yes, but she was scared to ask, right? So I go up and I like have a conversation with the woman at the desk, and they were amazing and they made accommodations for her. And then she went to camp and she had a great day. And when we came home, we had a conversation around how, while like I was very grateful that you shared with me how you were feeling and what your concerns were, and you saw that mommy went and had a conversation and asked, and like she was right there next to me, and how not always are they going to be able to make accommodations, but this time they did, and look what a great day you had. And so that's just one small example.
I like that. So you taught her how to ask for her accommodations.
Yeah.
That's so important. I think people forget that too. Like
Yeah.
specifically because and one thing that I preach on this show and in my teachings about, hiring with neurodiverse and things like that is and hiring neurodiversity is that accommodations. I don't like that word because it's now as a southerner it means something pleasant, right? You're being accommodating, you're helping, you're doing nice things for your guests or whomever. But for everyone else, it's like, oh, I gotta accommodate them. I gotta deal with them. That's what it sounds like to them. I'm dealing with you. So I like to talk about options and how there should always be options for everyone because depending on what studies you read, it's the neurodiverse population is between 30 and 50%. I lean more towards the 30% just based off of the research I've done. But that's a huge part of the population. Why is it not more normal to have these options for these kids that are not complicated options?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? And we can have a whole sidebar conversation around like this education system and the systemic issues there, the corporate system and the systemic issues there, right? And I think it's this one size fits all, or historically has been this one size fits all situation. And you open the conversation saying in a previous conversation with Tripp, I believe, right? He was dealing with the school.
Right.
I mean, so Lucy just started kindergarten this year, and it has been our first experience with public school. We always did private in Chicago, and I knew the system really well in Chicago. We just moved to the Massachusetts area, and often I feel like I am cornered by the school. I am either going to have to be like that overprotective mama bear who's like really aggressive, or I'm like backed into a corner and I have to roll over and do what the school says. And that's a crappy, sorry.
I couldn't do that. Of course, I'm weird. I was born like ready to fight, I think. So I never have problems with confrontation, but it is an awful position because then it becomes adversarial, which it shouldn't be. It should be,
Exactly.
oh, okay, this child needs this. Let's just all work together. Duh. But it's not, right? People are like, again, it's the people are like, oh, you're making me work. You're making me do things. I don't like it.
It's interesting because my background is in sales. I led sales and marketing teams at a well-known tech company for many years. And I feel like I've had to use those skills that I gained in corporate in like parenting life. And so you're right. Like if I sort of approach the conversation with the school, their walls would go up immediately. And so I've really tried to approach it with curiosity and trying to understand their context and understand all the key stakeholders and sort of what their context is and, where they're coming from. So that way, when I am approaching them, I sort of have this idea of like the full picture and then can advocate in a way that is going to be more productive than less productive. And
that's important.
Yeah.
Productivity. We're not shaming your anger about how other people aren't helping, but productivity is the key.
It is. And to be fair, it doesn't mean like every conversation I have with school is like peachy and amazing and people don't like leave frustrated. Of course, that's not the case. But, I think that there's a genuine respect that we've been able to foster sort of with the team that at least we can come back to that foundation each time and say like, okay, this got really hot. Like, let's regroup. And
I want to hit on that because I think that's so crucial. And I love that you tied in your professional experience to that, because that is a lot of times where we learn that skill of how to be more diplomatic. And when you go in with diplomacy, you're going to create that foundation so that, again, to your point, when things get frustrated. So when you go in, it's important to not attack. And believe me, when I tell you folks, I get it. I get what it feels like to be like, are you kidding me? This is so obvious. What is wrong with you? Or you handled this so poorly. What is wrong with you? I understand that 100%, but it's just not diplomatic. So and it's not effective. And ultimately what you want is to help your child in this case, or yourself if you're going into work, right? This can apply either way. So go in and just go, hey, so this happened. It didn't, this isn't quite, what I need, and make it and just say, this isn't quite what I need or what my child needs. Here are some suggestions, but what are your thoughts? What can we do to make it more positive going forward? Does that sound, that's what I've done on the work front. Is that about what you do?
Yeah, it's very similar. I think I actually even start with curiosity first. So I'll try to get like their perspective before I even sort of say, here's again, every situation is different, but I really try to approach every situation with genuine curiosity, right? Because there's always several sides to the story. And
that's true.
Each of us have our own version of truth, right? And so to be able to sort of understand where someone is coming from, I think is really important. So that way, when I am sort of saying, thank you, I appreciate you sharing your perspective, here's my experience, right? And I always say when having these conversations, and I like to call them courageous conversations. I don't know why. It's probably a buzzword that
whatever, it works.
Somewhere. But right, your feelings are valid, right? So always using the statement, I feel in this experience, I experienced, and making it about your experience or your child's experience, it goes a really long way, right? Like people can't, they can, but they can't really.
It's hard to argue with that.
Exactly. They can react to it, but they can't argue with it because it's your experience.
Right. My sister actually, who works with children in a school as a counselor, has talked about the importance of communicating that way. And especially, when it comes to children, but even just adults talking to one another, how much more effective that is. And that's something I actually started learning from her, is that's how she would address it. Sissy, when you said that, this was my experience, or when this happened, that's my experience. And it really does just kind of send it in a whole other direction. It does. And I want to ask you too. So this is a subject about which I get really heated. So I'm going to try so hard not to do that. Is I get really tired of people acting like a diagnosis of neurodiversity is a bad thing. And I want to stop real quick, and I do want to give honor. There are the more unusual circumstances in which a neurodiversity can be an actual disability, and it can be a very challenging, difficult circumstance. There are those extremes, and I want to acknowledge that. But 99.9% of the time, it's not. It's just a difference. It's just a different way that that person processes information. What has been your experience on that front of people's response to you talking about your daughter's diagnoses?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, I think that my experience has been all over the place. Like, I've had amazing conversations with people who understand and are empathetic. And then I've had, people like think that like my world is ending, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I mean, and I think that, I think a lot of things in life like build towards one another. So I always said that like infertility gave me sales gave me a thick skin, and then infertility gave me a thicker skin, right? And now having a daughter with neurodiverse needs, right? And not that a thick skin is a bad thing, but it's allowed me to sort of recognize that like when people are coming at me with their reactions, it's their reactions. Like they are.
Yes, that is their problem.
Their problem. They might not be educated. They might not be educated. And so I can make that choice in that moment. Do I want to spend the time educating them, or do I, want to just sort of say,
just let it go
and we're going to move on. Right. And that's the choice that I have to make every day as a parent, right? In terms of advocating for both myself and my child. And, Lucy will have to do that too, as she continues to get older.
I love that too, because a friend of mine whose son is autistic, he's so adorable. Like, he was born just knowing that he's a superhero. Like, in his mind, he even has a little cape. He's very, very adorable. And he will tell people if they say something that he deems ignorant, he will educate them and say, no, that's not correct. And he'll just tell them. And that's just how his mind works. And he's not being rude. He's just telling them, no, I'm sorry, that's not right. And I love that. I love that he'll just advocate for himself and go, no, this is all it is. This is what I have going on. It's no big deal, and he'll tell them everything that's awesome about himself.
I love that.
It's so cute.
And I think that, it comes in lots of different ways. So I actually just posted about this on Instagram yesterday, where we were over the fall, Lucy had like fallen off a scooter, and a neighbor was like, oh, you poor thing. And Lucy like pops right up, looks at her directly in the eye and goes, my name's not Thing, my name is Lucy. And my heart like melted in that moment. I mean, I also was like laughing to myself, but like my heart melted in the moment because like so matter of fact, like so like she's like, don't call me that. Like that's not who I am. And she obviously didn't understand that it was like a saying, and
right, but still.
But like a simple example of being able to be like, please don't call me that. That's not my name. That's not what I want to be called. Candidly, like when I was her age, I don't think I would have been able to do that. And
right.
So to see her be able to sort of own that and know that, like, see how far I've come and being able to advocate and model and do that, like, it's so rewarding in so many different ways.
It means you're a good parent. That's what it means. Seriously, the fact that your kid is that confident and that well adjusted. I don't want to put all the credit on you. I mean, she's awesome in her own little right, but that means that you're doing a good job. The fact that she felt confident and empowered to speak that way, that means you're being a good mama. That's what it is right there. It's giving them the tools, going back to your point, right? Giving them the tools.
And then I think that's all it is, right? And I mean, again, we've had a huge support in the schools that we had in Chicago, the team that we surrounded ourselves in Chicago, the team that we've like surrounded ourselves with here in Massachusetts. So it's definitely not all me. My husband plays a large part.
Of course,
plays a large part. But there is and Lucy, right? Like she has to make that choice.
Yep.
So, like if she wants to lean into her superpowers, right? She doesn't have to.
Nope.
But she does, and sometimes she doesn't want to, and that's okay too.
It is.
And I
You
think
have
just
those
acknowledging
days. You have those days where it stinks. And I tell people, I talk about the superpowers, and I've had some people come at me very, very much from a hostile place about that. And a couple of things. Number one, different people are in different places in their journey. And it's okay to be angry that you have to deal with some of this nonsense. Because some days it's frustrating. I've made a point to be on camera a few times when I had my twitches, my shaking, which my good friend Stacy Kaysen, who is a guest on the show, called my dance moves. So, new positive way to look at that. But it is frustrating. There are days that it's irritating. There are days that, the depression kicks in when I could have really used the mania, or vice versa, and it's just like, ugh, like, come on, calm it down just a titch. Or I'm trying to relax by the beach, but I'm in a very highly manic stage and it's just not working. But what I tell people is you have to remember the positives. And that's part of how you get through that, is you remember the positives. You think about the awesome things about you that are because of whatever this is that's going on with you. And when you're the other person and you're talking to somebody about their condition, don't project your discomfort onto them. Yeah. Ask questions. That's okay. Ask questions. But don't be too nosy if they're obviously not wanting to talk about it. But don't project. Even, with my seizure disorder, people will go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Or "I'm so sorry that you're bipolar." I'm not. So that's a really weird response. It was the same thing with my hysterectomy. I had other people like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Why? You're sorry that I'm healthier? That's weird. That's a weird thing to be sorry about. Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up, what are your final thoughts about how people can better respond to neurodiverse children specifically?
Yeah, I think it's just realizing that you never know what's going on beneath the surface, right? And so you don't know how someone's brain digest information. You don't know what someone is dealing with. You don't know if the person had an amazing night's sleep or like a really shitty night's sleep, right? And so you just don't know. And so my general takeaway is to lean in and lead with empathy and curiosity as often as you can, especially when it comes to children. And it's not always easy, and our brains are wired to label and put people into boxes and to judge. And so it's not always easy, but the more that you can understand all sides of the picture, I think the better off our children will be, and frankly, our society and culture will be. And so
I like that.
The words that I try to live by.
That is beautiful. And I have nothing to add to that. So with that, thank you so much for having joined us, Jessie. Everybody, please feel free to connect with Jessie on LinkedIn. Spell out your last name for everybody. So it's Jess.
Jessie Shuraleff, Shuraleff, as in Frank, F as in Frank. Really should have kept the maiden name.
It's okay. So thank you so very much again for joining us. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn if you haven't done so already. And we'll see you again next Tuesday. Bye, everybody.